Namaskar. Thank you for joining us here on the Economic Brief, the program that looks at key stories from the worlds of business, finance and economy and contextualizes them from local as well as global perspectives. So on the show today, S&P Global and CRISIL see India's growth momentum sustaining for the foreseeable future. Sri Lanka's new government faces economic challenges amid optimism and change. Has Microsoft revived the fortunes of a dying nuclear energy plant? And we leave you with the top news stories of the day. But first, we'll look at some plain speaking about India's rise as a world power. Now, this is External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar setting the record straight about India being all things to all people.
Can you be all things to all people and all regions? Does that really work?
It's not that we are all things to all people, we are ourselves to all people. There are today a lot of countries who feel that their freedom of choice, their operational flexibility should not be constrained because their interests are much more complicated and much more diverse than the binary picture which the Cold War era represented. Look at the BRICS. I mean, you have today countries like UAE or Egypt or Saudi Arabia. Now, these are countries which have had strong relations with the West, still have strong relations with the West. So it's not like by being in the BRICS or being in SCO, you are necessarily sort of turning your back on your other relationship.
But let's first look at a report by S&P Global Marketplace and how it looks at India over the next few years. Clearly, it sees India maintaining a very strong growth rate and doubling the size of its economy by 2030-31. That's the financial year we're talking about. So it's currently about $3.6 billion, they say, but it's about $3.9 trillion, I beg your pardon, moving to about $7 trillion by 2030. But global GDP share was also going to rise at that point of time, currently about 3.5%, and that would increase to about 4.5% of the global GDP. The global GDP also will be growing at that point of time, so the growth has to be looked at, in terms of context. Now, the per capita income of India would also be increasing, and at that time it will put India in the category of a middle income country. So India will be in the category of a middle income country by then. And of course, India would be the third largest country in terms of economy by then. The growth rate of India is currently still at about 6.8%, and that is being maintained, and that will be maintained for the foreseeable future. India is going to be the largest growing, the fastest growing large economy in the world. We're looking at current fiscal year, that's currently on, fiscal year 2024-25, and it has seen already significant green shoots, or you can say indicators for the economy doing well. That is, first, the GST collections are at record highs. The PMI Purchasing Managers Index is also showing very high output, in the index. It's at a 14-year high. Very clear signals that the Indian economy is on the right trajectory. When we look at why this is happening, we can see that manufacturing is also improving because of schemes like the Productivity-Linked Incentive Scheme, which is boosting new areas and new sectors, some of them being electronics, pharmaceuticals. Already we know that India is being talked about as the pharmacy of the world. Now, CRISIL, which is also part of this grouping of S&P Global, sees that 18 to 20% of investment is going to be in new sectors. We'll be talking about that with the chief economist of CRISIL in a little while. But, investments also are expected in semiconductors and electronics going forward. So clearly we can see that if we look at this report, it seems to indicate that India is on a strong wicket in a sense, and investments are are likely to continue to come in, and India's growth trajectory is pretty confident and firm. Let me introduce you to our guests on the program. We have with us DK Joshi, who's the chief economist of CRISIL, and Dr. Nilanjan Banik of the Mahindra University from Hyderabad is with us. Mr. Joshi, let me start with you. All indicators show sustained momentum to India's growth engine. What's the main reason for this?
Well, I think if I take a step back, the post-pandemic recovery that we have seen has so far surprised on the upside. If I take the year 23-24, the first estimate was 7.3%, and finally it came in at 8.2%. I think there are two reasons for that. One is that the government focus on infrastructure through public spending, I think that has higher multiplier effects on the economy, and we are seeing some benefits of that. In addition to that, I think there are some domestic strengths also which add to the resilience of the economy, because this period has been marked by a lot of global volatility, which is the balance sheet strength of the corporates, the balance sheet strength of the banks. So the lender and the borrower are in good health. On top of that, the external balance sheet is also good. So you have, which means I think the current account deficit is low, so you are less at the mercy of foreign capital inflows. If you put them together, so you're seeing growth with resilience. Now, I think if I look at this year particularly, the first quarter GDP came in at 6.7%. This is despite the fact that the government spending, government investments were not growing during this period because it was an unusually long election period, and that disrupted the government spending. But despite that, economy grew at 6.7%. So in the coming quarters, you're going to see government spending return and the growth also move up a little bit. So we expect economy to grow at 6.8% this year, which is slightly slower than last year, but still the fastest among the large economies.
Right. Mr. Joshi, also your report has projected India will reach $7 trillion by 2030. What is going to be driving this growth?
Well, I think from a medium to long-term perspective, you look at the factors of production. And here, I think investments will play a major role because we expect about 53% of this growth to come from investments, which is public, household, as well as corporate investment. Then you'll also see the increased contribution of productivity or efficiency, as we call it. Efficiency means that with the same inputs, you can produce more. And that essentially comes through creation of physical infrastructure, which is improving the turnaround times at the ports, is making the traffic move faster. So the logistics constraint is slowly getting addressed. So that is one part of it. Then you have digital infrastructure where we have leapfrogged. So the payment systems or the interoperable system, India Stack that we have, all of them allow you to innovate. And I think that also adds to the efficiency. Even the traffic, because of fast tagging, moves much faster. Okay. And then I think finally economic reforms like the GST, you mentioned about the GST collections. I think it takes a while before they pay off. And I think now we are seeing the benefits of goods and services tax play out in not only in terms of better tax collections for the government, but also some efficiencies that come with that.
Dr. Banik, given all that Mr. Joshi has said, is the middle income trap a concern for India, or can India, with a youthful population, overcome it?
I don't think a middle income trap will be a problem. Let me emphasize why this is so. Basically, what happens when we are talking about middle income trap is the economy cannot continue to grow at the rate at which it is growing. Now, you just now mentioned that the Indian economy is growing at the fastest pace, and it is the only large economy which is growing in excess of 6%, 6.5%. Now, there are two ways to fuel this growth. One is through labor force participation. The other is through technological breakthrough. Now, if you look into the growth performance of most of the North American countries, it is actually fueled by the technological innovation. On the contrary, if you look into the growth perspective of all the Southeast Asian countries, these were actually driven by labor force participation. Now, in case of India, we are seeing at this point of time, both of these factors, be it labor force participation or be it technological innovation, both are actually playing out. For instance, if I'm looking into the digital infrastructure, India has one of the least cost data in the world. What that has done, it has actually democratized the way to do business. And because of that, what you see, many Indian small retailers, small and micro enterprises who otherwise were not able to do business are now in a position to do business. So in that way, the trickling down effect of growth is happening in a wide, diverse way.
Okay.
Apart from that, you mentioned about this PLI scheme. Earlier, what was happening is we were actually growing on the back of the services sector. Now, what is happening, as Mr. Joshi pointed out, we also see a lot of capital investment coming in the infrastructure sector. What it also means is the cost of doing business is coming down, and it is also creating employment to the not so skilled type of labors. And you should also understand the multiplier effect for investing in physical infrastructure is almost 2.5. What it means, if government is spending 100 rupees, it is in a way generating 250 rupees of income. So in that way, what we are saying, this phase is going to continue for a long period of time, and I think Indian economy is going to do well.
Mr. Joshi, before I let you go, let me ask you one more question about the concerns with climate change and how this can be factored in to India's growth story.
Well, I think so. India is in a unique position in the sense that most of the Asian economies which grew fast, they did not have to decarbonize while they were growing. So India is basing its growth on creation of physical infrastructure, manufacturing, both of which are carbon intensive. So I think the unique challenge India faces is on two fronts. One is because of the climatic disruptions which are happening at a fast pace. How do you adapt to them? How do you make your agriculture, for instance, more resilient to these climatic effects? I mean, right now, the only thing coming in the way of RBI cutting rates is high food inflation, and high food inflation is as a result partly of climatic shifts, heat waves, changing monsoon patterns. So the adaptation is one part, and then over the longer run, you have to generate less carbon per unit of output. So you have to decarbonize. For that, we have a window till about 2070 to become net zero. But I think the key issue is that climate will impose different kinds of costs. I've just talked about a few, but I think for the financial sector, I think everything has to adapt to the changing risks from the climate.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, DK Joshi, for talking to us. Dr. Banik, we appreciate your staying with us for our next story as well. And talking about that next story, the left turn that Sri Lanka has taken, it shows that people rely on their government to deliver them, from the economic distress that the country went through. But governments have limitations. They need to kickstart the economy to increase productivity and growth. Only that can give the economy the strength to sustain the people's aspirations. Now, experts say that this Anayake government will need to be practical. Let's look at this report. Sri Lanka's new president, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, has received a mandate to navigate the complexities of economic recovery. This includes managing high debt levels and implementing effective fiscal policies. Dissanayake wants to renegotiate the $2.9 billion bailout deal with the IMF, which he believes is unfavorable to working-class citizens. This will be a challenging task given the country's limited fiscal space.
Our country needs international support. We expect that whatever the divisions in the international community to deal with countries, we get the best deal. We are not a state that needs to be isolated in the world. We are a nation that must go forward hand in hand with the international community. We will not hesitate to take decisions to achieve this.
The new president has promised pro-people economic reforms and unity amid ethnic divisions. Meeting these expectations while managing the pressures of populist demands will be a delicate balancing act. He's also been elected on an anti-corruption platform.
How things play out in 2025 and beyond is to be seen, but I think at the most immediate, he's going to take a very practical approach.
Dissanayake has called for fresh elections to secure a stronger mandate to meet these challenges. Prior to his election, Sri Lanka's economy was projected to see a moderate growth of 2.2% in 2024. It had shown signs of stabilization. However, poverty rates continue to rise for the fourth year in a row, with an estimated 25.9% of Sri Lankans living below the poverty line in 2023. Labour force participation had declined, particularly among women and in urban areas, with the closure of many micro, small and medium enterprises. High prices, income loss, underemployment and unemployment. Household debt was naturally on the rise to meet basic requirements and maintain spending on health and education, a fertile ground for a leftist leader advocating social equity.
Our main expectation is for the cost of living to reduce and the economic situation of the poor people to improve.
Our expectations have come true. What is needed is for the crisis-ridden country to be rebuilt.
The economic crisis and what led to the people's movement are key indicators that people wanted a change. And that message was very much articulated in 2022 in wanting to see a change in political culture which kind of saw high corruption and nepotism.
Disanayake's team includes JVP colleague Harini Amarasuriya, who has been a prominent academic and social activist. His finance minister is Sunil Handuneti, another key figure from the JVP, known for his financial expertise. The World Bank's outlook for 2025 for Sri Lanka prior to Disanayake's taking office projected a growth rate of 2.5%. The high debt service obligations and the need for continued structural reforms pose significant risks. The Economic Brief, DD India. Well, Dr. Banik is still with us. Dr. Banik, is this left turn, a call for an end to trickle-down economics, would you say? Because, similar things happen in Britain, and the Starmer government there believes that their mandate was meant to end trickle-down economics. Is that a misreading of a mandate?
Let me try to explain why Sri Lanka is in this position. Now, if you see what has happened post-COVID, now Sri Lankan economy was primarily driven by tourism activity. And if you look into their major export items, they are actually exporting items such as tea, rubber, leather footwear. And these are the items which are what we say is price elastic and income inelastic. What it means is if the world over the demand falls, then these are the items, because these are readily available from other countries, are the ones which actually bear the brunt, in the sense that their price go down quite much compared to other type of technology intensive export. Now, what that has led to is post-COVID is you see for Sri Lanka, not only the current account deficit has gone up, and there is a one-to-one relationship between current account deficit and gross fiscal deficit. And their gross fiscal deficit went as high as 11%. Just to put in perspective, India's gross fiscal deficit is below 5%. And for a tiny country like Sri Lanka, you have gross fiscal deficit in excess of 11%. And that led to very high inflation. And of course, when you have that high inflation, it is the common man who actually suffer. Now, because of that, you also see other things are happening, because India, unlike India, Sri Lanka does not have a thriving service sector. So it has to depend upon all these low technology exportable items, and which in terms of their demand are also falling because of recession that we are seeing in Europe and in other countries. Right. So that way, Sri Lankan economy was in a very bad shape, because they also have taken a huge amount of loan from China. So if I look into their total debt, it is now in excess of 34 billion US dollar. So you have an economy where the productivity is coming down. You have an economy which is not producing any technology intensive goods which they can export. You have an economy which is not good in services. You have an economy which is kind of reeling under.
So its
the fact
productivity
that
is clearly limited at the current time. But, Dr. Banik, Britain and Sri Lanka are democracies. How much difference is there, in a left of center democracy and communist China? Because you were talking a lot about manufacturing and debts to China as well.
See, one of the things that China can do is they don't have to take into account what the common man are thinking. It's a party which decide how, so it's more like a centralized planning. But on the other hand, if you look in case of England or for that matter, Sri Lanka, what you see is you have a very strong presence of trade union, in particular in the case of United Kingdom. And because the most part of the median age population, the age of the population, they are more in excess of 43, 44. What is happening is many people are actually retiring in UK. And when you are retiring, because you are part of this a strong social security system, the government has to pay you all this retirement benefit. On the contrary, their immigration policy is quite strict, which is also not allowing productive labor from other countries to go and take up activities, manufacturing activities or other service related activities in case of UK. So what you see in case of UK is because of a strong social security framework and the presence of strong trade union, the government has to spend a huge amount of money towards what I say is dole. And because of this government subsidy on this elderly group of population, when your younger population are not coming in, that is leading to a fall in productivity.
Right.
And that is also explaining why in case of UK, investment as a percentage of GDP has fallen over the last 5 years.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Banik. Thank you for joining us on the Economic Brief today. And moving then on to our next story, Microsoft has revived the fortunes of a dying nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania, out of a sense of responsibility to use clean fuel. Whether this changes the fortunes of the 3 Mile Island nuclear energy plant, it had an accident, if we recall, in 1979. This remains to be seen whether it's going to be revived. But it clearly, the intent is that it can create jobs and repose faith in clean energy. Anu Kaushik reports.
Closed prematurely in 2019, the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant in the US state of Pennsylvania has got a new lease of life because of Microsoft. The tech giant has struck a 20-year deal with the plant's owner, Constellation Energy, to purchase power from the site. Hailing the pact as a milestone, Microsoft said that nuclear energy, which does not release any carbon, would help clean the environment. But the choice of the plant has triggered a row. In 1979, 3 Mile was the site of the worst nuclear disaster in US history. While the accident did not cause any deaths, the release of radioactive gases into the environment led to a negative public perception about nuclear plants. Rejecting the concerns, 3 Mile's owner has said that the unit, which will be used by Microsoft, is fully independent of the reactor which was involved in the disaster. Microsoft will be using the plant to power its data centers for artificial intelligence. The 3 Mile Island is expected to generate electricity enough to power nearly 800,000 homes. According to a study, the plant's reopening would create 3,400 jobs while generating billions of dollars in taxes. Microsoft is not the only tech giant turning to nuclear energy. Earlier this year, Amazon also signed a deal to purchase nuclear energy to power a data center. But both these deals remain under scrutiny by regulators. The Economic Brief, DD India.
Well, that's all we have in this edition of the Economic Brief. We'll leave you with top business stories of the week. And from all of us here, thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.
The International Monetary Fund has approved a $7 billion bailout to cash-strapped Pakistan. The country is due to receive the first billion of the loan immediately. OpenAI Chief Technology Officer Meera Murati announced her departure from the company. This is the most recent resignation in a string of executive departures from the company that created ChatGPT. Chairman of social media platform X, Elon Musk, responded to not being invited to UK government's International Investment Summit in response to his social media posts during riots that took place this summer. He wrote on X that people shouldn't visit UK when convicts are getting released in order to imprison people for social media posts. Meta announced that it's adding voice conversations and celebrity voices to its artificial intelligence chatbot. These includes the voices of Judi Dench, John Cena, and Keegan-Michael Key. Americans' credit card debt has reached a record high of $1.14 trillion, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. In May, the average credit card interest rate hit 21.5%. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump announced that he would impose a 100% tariff on cars manufactured in Mexico if he wins the election. American multinational tech company IBM is laying off thousands of employees, impacting senior-level programmers, sales and support staff, according to a report in the Register. The Bangladesh government has issued orders to export over 2,000 tons of Hilsa fish to India ahead of the festive season. This decision is expected to lead to a significant drop in the price of Hilsa. India's mobile phone manufacturing value has surged to 4.1 lakh crore rupees over the past 10 years. Indian telecom company Bharti Airtel launched the country's first network-based AI-powered spam detection solution. It will significantly address the issue of spam calls and messages for its customers.